Okay, do you all see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, so before we begin our webinar, I'll tell you all a little bit about Puddletown Chess. So Puddletown Chess is a registered 501c3 nonprofit that benefits young chess players in Oregon. So our founders are Zoe, Ishan, who's my brother, Austin, and myself. So at Puddletown, we conduct rated tournaments, training, free game analysis at our tournaments, free monthly webinars like this one, and a weekly chess arena and office hours for our training program. So as a registered 501c3 nonprofit, all of the profits go back to the community to help those in need. And so far, we've donated over $50,000 back into the chess community in Oregon. Our vision at Puddletown is to help 1,000 scholastic players reach a USCF rating of 1,000 or more. So about myself, I'm an eighth grader at Willamette Valley, and I'm the co-founder and level 2 and 3 coach. I've been playing chess ever since I was in first grade, and I've competed in local and national tournaments ever since. And I also love playing in team chess events. In 2022, I was the team captain for Jacob Wismer, and we won first place. And I also helped Stoller Middle School win first place at the state team championship in 2023. I also helped the Puddletown team win first place in 2024. And other than chess, I like video games, swimming, Python programming, and also robotics. Okay, so now we'll start with the topics. So this monthly webinar is about unlocking your chessboard, and it's which is also which includes key principles from the opening to the end game. And we have strategies, tips, ideas, and resources. Okay, so we'll start with the first level, which is mastering the opening. To master the opening, we have to remember all of these rules. First, we have to develop minors first, castle, and then connect the rooks. Minors include knights and bishops, and the order that we want to develop the minors is knights before bishops, because once we develop the central pawns, which are the E and D pawns, the bishops already have some mobility, and at that point, the least active of the minor pieces are the knights. So we must start with those first. And third, we we are not supposed to move pawns unless it helps with development so that we don't get a weak position early on in the game. And fourth, we have to move the least active piece first and then the other pieces, which is also known as the principle of least activity. Fifth, we have to bring the pieces to the most active squares, and the most active squares are central squares, which is also known as the principle of maximum activity. Next, we have to take toward the center, and our pawns have to be in the center to attack. And last, we have to make the most flexible moves. And our pieces should have more options than the opponent's pieces. Okay, so now, hmm, hold on. Okay, sorry.
एक मिनट को सर.
Okay, um, hold on. Okay, so now we'll move on to some puzzles.
Did you already to put the puzzle?
No, it's like some technical issue. Hold on. Give me 1 second. Okay, sorry about that. Um, Now let me share my screen. Um, okay. Um, okay, do y'all see the screen? Okay. So we'll start with some puzzles about the opening. But first I want to talk a little bit more about the central squares. So putting your pieces in the center makes it hard for your opponents to play the game, especially with knights or bishops. It makes it even harder if your opponent can't make any pawn breaks or attack the center. The squares surrounding the center are known as the mid-center squares, which are these squares highlighted with red. And these squares are also good attacking points. Moves like e4, d4, knight of 3, knight c3, bishop f4, and bishop c4 all attack the center, or mid-center squares. Think of the center as a wall. If you have control of the wall, then it makes it very easy for you to get your pieces over the wall. But it also makes it very difficult for your opponent to get their pieces over the wall. Elise, do you have a question?
Yeah.
Okay.
So the isn't the castling also one of the best moves?
Well, that comes after you develop.
Mendoza.
We're talking about like developing squares. Okay, any other questions before I move on? Okay. Okay, so next I want to talk about some good opening moves. So some good opening moves are e4, which opens a line for the bishop, and also d4 opens a line for the bishop. Knight f3 develops a piece immediately. And also one other move that's played regularly for white is c4. And this move attacks one center square. This opening is called the English, and it's considered to be slightly more complex than any of the than e4 or d4, and should be learned after learning one of the um either e4 or d4. Okay. So next, I want to talk about bad opening moves. So some bad opening moves include a4, and this move is considered bad because even though it opens the rook a little bit, it still doesn't attack any of the important central squares. c3 is considered to be bad because even though it attacks one of the central squares, d4, it doesn't allow the knight on b1 to come to c3. And the knight likes the square on c3 because it attacks two of the central squares. And then knight h3 is bad because even though it develops a piece, it doesn't attack anything. The saying goes that knights on the rim are dim. This knight on h3 is only attacking f4 and g5, whereas if it was on f3, it would attack two central squares. Sharav, do you have a question?
Why is G4 so bad?
G4? G4 is bad because this pawn is really weak and like it can be countered with D5, which gets a pawn in the center, and also it attacks this pawn on G4. And also it's not attacking one of the central squares, it's only attacking F5 and H5. And this pawn will easily become a target in the near future. So yeah, don't play G4. Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Okay. Elise.
So what will happen if you did if what will happen if you move the eights and a pawns?
I kind of talked about it. So like A4, it sort of gives you rook some activity, but it doesn't attack any of the central squares, and it's hard. It's also hard for you to use the rook's activity. So that's why we don't usually play A4.
And what happens if you play what how about what happens if you play it only one what happens if you play the middle pawns only one time?
Like A3,
No, like eat 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 tree.
E3.
What
This
happens?
is okay. I think this is some sort of opening. I forgot what it's called though. Like it's okay, but
Well, the Vant Cruzy's opening.
huh?
E3 on the first move is the Vant Cruzy's opening.
The Van Cruz. Yeah, sometimes it's displayed, but yeah, I wouldn't recommend it because the evaluation immediately goes to 0.0. So yeah, you shouldn't play that. Elise, do you have a question or okay? KS, do you have a question?
If you were playing a game, what would you say would be like a good opening to start with?
I'd say like E4 is good to start with because it's pretty easy to learn all the lines and there aren't too many,
Okay.
but there are a lot of sidelines. So, yeah, you should start with E4. Okay, so next I want to talk about activity. So, this is one very important thing that your pieces need to succeed. So activity is measured by how many squares your piece can go to. So more squares equals more activity. So say that white starts with the most common opening move, E4, and black responds with D6. So this move isn't putting the pawn in one of the central squares, but it does attack a central square. So D6 is okay. So then we play D4 so that we get control of both of black's center squares. And then black responds with A6. So this move is bad because it doesn't attack any central squares, and that's what we want to do in the opening. So this move isn't good. And then we play knight f3, which is developing a piece and also putting pressure on the e5 square. And then black plays knight c6. This is a good move because it also attacks two central squares. And then we play bishop f4, putting even more pressure on the e5 square and also developing a piece. And black plays knight a7. This move is bad because it just moved one of the knights on the good square back. So that's bad. And then we play bishop c4, um, putting on the center and also developing a piece. So then knight h6, remember the saying, knights on the rim are dim. And then we play knight c3, getting the last minor piece developed. So then bishop d7. Well, this is developing a piece. It's not really doing anything to maximize the bishop's activity, and black will have to move it one more time
Maybe it would have
to
been
get the
better
most out of this bishop.
maybe it would be better if that black bishop moved to like D4 or something.
Yeah, bishop g4 is putting a pin on this knight. So yeah, bishop g4 would have been better. Okay, but bishop d7 and then queen d3. So this is getting the queen developed. Um, I think maybe castle would have been better, but both of them are the same because we can just castle on the next move anyways. So queen d3 and then queen b8. So queen b8 makes both the rook and the queen useless. So that's a bad move. And then castle and e6. This is okay, which is it's also putting more pressure on the center. And then rook a1 is maybe trying to go for d5, but you shouldn't play d5 because then there's e5. It's just like getting the rooks into the game. So then bishop e7, this is developing a piece, but it's also not really doing anything. So then rook f1, getting the other rook into the game. And then bishop d8. Yeah, this is just like a blunder. And then h3, which is like I don't know, stopping knight g4. Maybe we could have played bishop takes h6. I think either of them are okay though. Okay, so h3. Now, position would you want to have here? Black's pieces are very cramped and can't go anywhere without the threat of being attacked by one of our pieces. White's pieces have control of the wall and they can move anywhere freely, and our pieces are much more active than black's. So we would prefer to have white's position here. Okay, so next I want to talk about threats. So all of your pieces in the opening should have a purpose, and making threats is something they should be able to do. A threat is when one of your pieces attacks the opponent's pieces or position, requiring immediate or or requiring immediate action. White's threats here include bishop takes a6, bishop takes f7, e5, which is a double attack, bishop takes f6, knight b5, and d5. So the takeaway from this position is that activating your pieces while making threats is a good way to take advantage of your opponent's bad pieces. Okay, next I want to go deeper into knights or bishops first. So knights are usually considered to be better developed first. Knights on c3 or f3 are taking control of the center and can be played on the very first move. Bishops can be developed to e3, f4, g5 or d3, c4, and b5 to do something. If they're developed to d3, c4, e3, or f4, they attack central squares. If they're developed to g5 or b5, they can be used to make threats against the opponent. Knights should be developed first because you want to evaluate the position and see which of the squares they would be better placed on and move the knights to where they are usually placed. So start with e4 and then e5, knight f3, knight c6, knight c3, and knight f6. So we have the four knights position. And then bishop b5, which is making an immediate threat because if black does nothing, then like a6, then we have bishop takes c6, and black is forced to take back, and we have knight takes e5, winning a pawn. So that's like an example of why you want to develop your knights first. So we see here that because all four knights are developed out, we want to make threats. So we play bishop b5. Okay. Hold on. So next I want to talk about a very common opening mistake. So this common mistake is moving your pieces twice before everything else is developed. Something weaker players like to do is moving their knights all over the board. The reason they like doing this is because the knight's ability to jump over pieces and its L-shaped maneuvering makes it very difficult to predict where it will go next. The knight is also a very good attacker. When you play stronger players, to punish you for this, they will first develop all their pieces. Second, control the center. Third, shut down knight movements. And fourth, destroy you. Okay, so let's see what happens. So knight c3, d5. They've already started with the second step, which is controlling the center of the board. So knight a4, just moving the knight again. And e5, now they've gained complete control of the center. And knight c3 is moving knight back. And already here, it's minus 1.0 valuation for black, which is very good in the opening. So bishop c5 is starting with the first step of developing all other pieces. So knight f3, getting another knight into the game. Knight c6 is protecting e5. Knight a4 is putting a threat on c5. So bishop d6 is the only move so that we don't lose the bishop. And d3, bishop g4, knight g5, and knight f6. So developing all minor pieces are done. Knight c3, h6, knight f3, queen e7, knight h4, and d4, knight b5, bishop c5, knight a3, and e4. And most of the knight movement is minimized. Now the knight on h4 can't go anywhere, and the knight on a3 only has 2 squares. So f3,
White made a lot of knight moves.
yeah, that's kind of the point to show you what happens. So f3, e3, f takes g4, and bishop b4. So bishop d2, e takes d2, queen takes d2, bishop takes d2, and king takes d2, and now it is over for white. So obviously you'll have to move some of your pieces twice, like if the pieces are being attacked or if there's something that you can do to take advantage of your opponent's position. So don't take this too literally, but try to minimize it and don't do it randomly.
Or move
Okay,
something else besides knights. Or anything
yeah,
else. Like
okay.
that.
So for this first puzzle, so who is better in this position? So here, white obviously has more control of the center, which makes it better for white. So let's say, ideally, one of your goals is to get 2 center pawns and have full control of the center. If you cannot, try to get a 1.5 pawn center, which is either d4 and e3 or e4 and d3 for white. Here, yeah, as I told you earlier, we have full control of the center. Okay, for this second puzzle, I want to ask one of you. So, who's better in this position? Raise your hand and use the virtual hand, or else I can't see you. Um, Sanvi?
I think it's like the same because they both have like the same opening, so it's equal right now.
Yeah, exactly. So, since we both have 1 center pawn, it is, hold on. Um, okay, so it is equal. Okay, so, okay. In this position, who is better? And raise your virtual hand. Um, Alicia?
Well, it kind of looks like oh, black advanced more, but for some reason I feel like it's a bit equal because both sides um has has kind of like the similar amount of control.
Actually, it's better for black, as you told us. first because black has a 2 center pawn, while white only has a 1.5 center pawn.
I also because one of black's
or
pawns
pawn structure.
controls one of the developing squares for knight.
Yeah. So like the knight can come to f3 and the bishop can come to c4 or d3. So it's hard for the white pieces to develop. Okay. Next, we'll move on to the middle game. So let me share my screen.
After we finish, are we going to play again a game against each other?
See how far we get.
Yeah, we are.
We might. But this is a 90-minute class, and we'll try.
How many games can we play?
We don't know yet, Elise. Let's talk at the end.
Okay.
Neev, also, there's one more slide which shares
Yeah.
what not to do, if you don't mind doing that.
Okay. So I forgot to share this earlier, but this is what not to do in the opening. So first, we don't want to make unnecessary pawn moves in the opening or middle game. And pawn moves should only aid development during the opening. And in the middle game, pawn moves should only aid in the position for attack. Second, we don't want to develop the queen early, and developing the queen is the third task of the opening. If you develop the queen early, say to like h4, then it becomes an easy target for for your opponent. Third, we don't want to move the same piece twice as I showed you in a position. And fourth, don't launch an attack before you develop pieces. And this is because if you do, then it's easy for your opponent to gain control of the center and shut down your attack. And fifth, only start your attack after the opponent makes a mistake. So ideally, you want to improve your position and wait for your opponent to make a mistake before you create an attack. Okay, we did exercises. Okay. And for the second, we are doing the middle game blueprint. What should we do? In the middle game, the most critical goal is to create an attack. An attack can be for different purposes, and some examples are creation of weaknesses, attacking existing weaknesses, gaining central domination, creating a passed pawn in the center, gaining material advantage, breaking through the opponent's defense, neutralizing the opponent's most active piece, gaining pawn majority, or making the opponent's pieces ineffective by restricting them. Whenever pieces attack each other, and when you have more than one obvious option, you should start calculating variations. First, you should realize all of the forcing candidate moves. Second, for each candidate move, think about the opponent's forcing moves. Third, build up a variation until pieces stop attacking each other. Or fourth, at the end of the forcing variation, evaluate your position and make your first move. Mokshit, do you have a question?
But in the King's Indian defense, the main idea in the middle game is to march your pawns against the king. So,
Well, yeah, there's some exceptions to this, obviously. Well, marching your pawns towards the king is like part of the opening, and it's to like break open the opponent's defense and make this. So like that goes on along with the middle game blueprint. Okay, so how long should you think before making these critical move calculations? For a 15-minute game, think for 1 to 3 minutes. For a 25-minute game, think for 2 to 5 minutes. For a 50-minute game, think for 3 to 10 minutes. And for a 120-minute game, think for 7 to 20 minutes. Elise?
Has anybody played the Pod the Kings?
Yeah, that happens a lot. Like in the end game, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, that happens a lot.
And
Okay.
in the beginning?
No. I mean, the end game is just like not a lot of pieces. So, okay. So now we're gonna do some exercises. So I'll solve 1 or 2 sample puzzles, and you will solve 2 to 4. Okay. Hold on. Elise, do you still have a question, or did you forget to lower it?
I got to lower it.
Okay. Okay, so the next section is about the middle game, as I told you earlier. Okay. Before, okay. So the 3 middle game strategies you need to remember are, first, we need to think of the center. Attacking the center should be your main goal in the middle game stage because it can be used if your opponent wants to attack the flank. So if your opponent, the flank is like the edges of the board. So like if they want to attack these sides, then because most of their pieces will be concentrated on the sides, we should open the center and then create a counter attack against them. So that's what we should do. And second, think of active squares for your pieces. In the opening, if you're not able to get your pieces to good squares, then you need to get them to better squares. Sometimes within the middle game, sometime within the middle game to prepare for the end game. Third, you need to think of the outpost. Thinking of the outpost is a good way to activate your pieces, especially with knights. An outpost is a square that can't be easily attacked by your opponent's pawns. Somewhere within their 4 ranks of space, and their 4 ranks of space are like, so you have your 4, which are 1 through 4 or 5 through 8, depending on if you're white or black, and you want to attack the other ones. And fourth, you need to think of your opponent's weaknesses, and we'll talk more about that one next. Okay. So let's say, for example, your knight is on h3 for some reason. So you have to think about how it can come into the center or attack the center. So don't pay attention to the moves. I'm just making some random moves for black. So we want to bring it to the center. So we play knight g5 to get it to e4 next. So h6 and then knight e4. So now we have a centered knight. And then a5 and then e3. So our bishop is also not doing good. So we want to get that out next. And then rook a7, bishop e2. The bishop also isn't doing much on e2, so we need to think about how it can become better. So we play bishop c4, and then d5, bishop e3, f5. And next we want to make an outpost. So we look at the squares which are not being attacked or can't be attacked by your opponent's pawns, and we see e5. So how can we get it there? We play knight g5, or like we don't pay attention to black, so rook a7, knight f3, and then knight e5. This is a great outpost for your knight as it attacks lots of the opponent's squares and can't be attacked by any pawns. Okay, next I want to talk about weaknesses. Hold on. Okay. Okay. So this position is from a game of two grandmasters, Capablanca and Yates. So we see here that Black's last bishop is on a light square, and so is every single one of his pawns. He would have preferred his bishop to be on a dark square, but instead it's stuck in his own pawn chain. For example, bishop on e7 would have a much better line of vision than a bishop on c8. So, in this game, Yates played f5. This move is considered to be dubious because usually Black's idea would be to play f6 and to start patching up the holes or the dark squares and plan to play e5 and get the bishop out next. But f5 kind of ruins all those plans. So we play queen d2, and then Black plays knight e5. So this move is not advisable because when you don't have a certain piece, in this case a bishop, you should look to your knights and observe what color square they're on. Here the knight on c6 was influencing the dark squares, but on e5 it influences the light squares, making it even harder for anything to happen in Black's position. So we play bishop e2, not wanting to lose the bishop, and knight c4, bishop takes, d takes, and now this pawn becomes a weak pawn. So queen d4. So queen d4 would have not been possible a few moves ago. So white immediately took advantage of that and moves the queen to a central square. Queen c7. Here, Yates is trying to avoid the queen trade because he knows the consequences that will come with it. Let's say if he took knight takes d4 and queen takes d4. Suddenly, Black is left with the problematic bishop and knight against two very strong knights, and he has lots of weak squares as well as pawns. So queen c7 and queen c5. Now the queen trade is inevitable because if the queen moves, then the c4 pawn will fall. So queen takes c5, knight takes c5, b6, knight 5, a4, and castle follows. Notice the consequences of b6. Our rook will come into Black's position with rook d6, rook c6. So I forgot to turn on castling, so ignore these moves. Okay, so now we castled, and then b5, and then knight c5. Now we just got a really good outpost for a knight. And rook b6, a4. a4 seeks to break down Black's queenside structure. So knight h5 and b3. C takes b3, c takes b3, b takes a4, and knight 3 takes a4. Now everything is supported on the queen side. So rook c6, king b2, and the pin is easily broken. Knight f6, rook d2, a5, and rook hd1, planning to go rook d6 next. So here we see a very good example of exploiting your opponent's weaknesses. To exploit weaknesses, we need to first identify the weak points you want to attack, in this case, the dark squares. Second, weaken your opponent's position by trading pieces away. And third, bring all the pieces you can into the invasion. Okay. So next, let's move on to the next section. Okay, you all see the screen? Okay. So the third level is calculations. So what do we do to calculate? First, we need to check for forcing moves. First, checks, second, captures, and third, threats. And always check in that order. If there are no attacking moves, then you increase your activity or decrease your opponent's activity. You also want to neutralize the opponent's attacking pieces, which are inside your territory, when you cannot counterattack by forcing their piece or pieces to go back or at least exchange. So after you make your or before you make your move, you have to you have to ask yourself, what is their next move? And also, what is their threat? You also always want to check for blunders and do it in the opening, middle game, and end game. Okay, next we're going to do some exercises. So let me share my screen. Okay. Um, Usually in chess, we go from the most forcing moves to the least forcing moves. 1 second. Okay. In a game, it is usually just us making threats or defending against threats. This is where the scanning method comes in. The scanning method is looking at every single piece and seeing where they can go to make threats or counter threats. The scanning method is better used in more strategic positions so you don't miss anything. First, we look at the most active moves, which include checks, captures, and threats. The last thing we want to do in this position is play a move like Rook B1 to defend the threat. There are no good checks in this position. There is one good capture in this position. Rook takes f6, which we list down as a candidate move. A candidate move is a list of 3 to 5 considerable moves. For threats, we might be able to invite Rook takes b2, and if they do, we can play something on the king side to punish it. One threat we could have is d4, and if Rook takes b2, we can do d takes e5, but after d takes e5, Black has another threat. If we play Rook takes f6, then if we play Rook takes f6, then g takes f6. Then if we play Queen h4, it almost works, but Black has f5, neutralizing the threat and being an exchange up. Okay, so I want to ask one of you, after all that I've told you, what should White do here? And raise your hand, raise your virtual hand. And also lower your hand if you already spoke. Um, Mokshit,
D4?
d4.
Yeah.
So after d4, Black will play Rook takes b2,
Oh.
and then What do you want to do next? D takes
Then-
E5?
Yeah.
Okay, so not rook
Not
takes,
not rook.
sorry. Yeah, I know. Okay, D takes E5. D
Then
takes E5, but
knight
then
C4.
black has another threat. I will like, huh?
Then knight C4.
Knight C4, then rook takes C2, right?
Yeah. Then you take the pawn without a knight.
Okay, but then there's rook takes A2, and then black has a passed pawn.
Okay.
So it doesn't really work, right?
Yeah.
Okay, anyone else have a move for what? Sharov?
B3.
B3.
If A takes B3,
So,
then A takes B3. No, actually, C takes B3. Then you have
okay.
A half pawn.
Well, it's kind of hard to take advantage of this, right? Because we're still in the middle game, and black has no real incentive to trade. So black can just continue with something like, let me think. Maybe
How about the
rook e8.
Yeah.
At least no. Okay, Sharanya, do you have a move in mind?
I'm thinking queen to the h4.
So queen h4. What happens after that? Like, let's say black plays rook takes b2. What do you want to do then?
Then rook takes f6.
Mm-hmm.
Then if the pawn takes, then my rook can take.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was looking for. Because we're threatening queen takes h6 as well as rook takes h6. So black is kind of forced to take this. It's like if they do rook takes c2, then queen takes h6, king g8, queen g5, king h8, and rook h6 is checkmate. Okay, so nice job, Sharanya. That was a hard one. Okay. Wait, do you guys have any questions about this? Elliot?
I was going to say what he said.
One, does like black have any other moves than other than like rook takes b2? There might be some other like defense. Like I don't know,
So
like knight g8 or that. I don't know. Something like that.
Knight g8.
Or something like that,
So
too.
after knight g8, yeah, I think there's this queen d8 and then rook takes f7 next. So maybe not g8. But you have anything else in mind? Yeah, it's kind of hard to defend with all these threats.
Can he show rook takes f6 first before queen h4? Like, is that any good? Something like
yeah. So I already like talked about this, but rook takes f6, g takes f6, queen h4. Hold on, it's loading. And then there's f5.
what
So
about
like f5.
Yeah, that makes sense. But what about rook f5 before queen that first instead of queen h4?
Okay. Then
Yeah, and then
rook
like
f5.
yeah,
I think rook g8. And then if queen f3, then just rook g6.
Maybe something like queen h4, then knight f3. I don't know. But I guess black, I don't know.
Yeah, it's hard to defend. Okay, we don't have a lot of time left, so let's move on. Okay, so one threat, I want to talk about forcing moves next. So one threat we have here is bishop b4. So obviously bishop b4 is a terrible move because of bishop takes b4, but it's also a very strong threat because if black does nothing, we have bishop takes e7 check. So other than that, there aren't any good threats. So let's move on to captures. One capture we see here is rook takes e7. We always have to go deeper into lines, no matter how bad they look. Okay, so yeah, like showed you bishop b4, then just bishop takes b4, but it also puts two pieces of pressure on it. So, yeah, so we have to look deeper into rook takes e7. So after rook takes e7, king takes e7, and then we can see that the king and rook are both lined up. So we can play bishop b4 check, and the king can only go to d8 or e6. So there's no way of defending this rook. So the rook is a lost cause. So then king e6 and bishop takes f8, and we're completely winning.
Wait, hold
Okay.
on. I thought I saw something. I saw something that the black could have done after the rook took the bishop and the bishop gave check.
Okay, what?
After the king took and the bishop, can't they just push the pawn twice and like block it?
And then we just take back, and you're down another pawn.
Uh.
Okay. So here, white has just played a7. How can we punish that? Raise your hand if you know. Elliot?
It's just a question from the last
Yeah.
from the last what if like black goes c6 after rook takes c7?
Takes e7, c6. Then I think just rook b7, c
And
takes
black is
b4,
down a
king
bunch of
e7,
pawns.
and then bishop. No, actually, after rook b8, king e7, then we have bishop b4,
Oh yeah.
and then
Oh
we'll
yeah.
take it next.
That's even better. Yeah.
Okay.
Alright.
Okay. Let's go back to this. Okay. So who has an idea? And also lower your hand if you already spoke. Jocelyn.
King F2. Yeah. Rook H1, King F2. And then Queen D2.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was looking for because now the king has nowhere to go. And also rook h1 just forced the king to go there. Okay, nice job, Jocelyn. Okay, next.
Couldn't we have gone something like Queen E3 check?
Well, actually, after queen, hold on. Okay, so yeah, after queen e3 check, then there's queen f2, and then we don't have like any threats of this next. Yeah.
What if it was white's to move?
White to move,
What if
then
white was moving first?
yeah, if instead white played something other than a7, which was a blunder, then they should play rook a e1. So like after rook h1 and king f2, after queen d2, there's no rook. I mean, there is rook e2, and then white is completely winning here because white has way more pawns, four more pawns or three more pawns. So yeah. Okay. Any more questions before I move on? Okay. So let me share my screen. And also, I'm not looking in the chat, so don't send messages there. You have to raise your hand if you want me to acknowledge your question. Okay, we just did some exercises. So the fourth level is the endgame. What should we do? There are only two correct plans in your endgames. No other plan is going to work. Either you attack your opponent's weak pawns or use your passed pawns. If you can do both, that's great. Otherwise, aim to do at least one of them. If you cannot do any of them, make a move that will help you at least that will help you do at least one of them on your future turns. Okay. Now we're going to do some exercises. Let
When is it going to
me
be
share my
game
screen.
time?
Soon. Just pay attention for now. Okay. So, what is a passed pawn? I hope all of you know this, but a passed pawn is a pawn that cannot be stopped by the opponent's pawns, not pieces. So our passed pawns include b5 and e4. The a pawn is not a passed pawn because black's a pawn stops it. The h pawn is also not a passed pawn because the g and h pawns stop it. All of black's pawns are not passed because they are all stopped by our pawns. The square of the pawn, or the rule of the square, is a very important rule to remember in endgames with passed pawns. So a square is drawn from the pawn you want to promote, here the b pawn, all the way to the last rank for us, which is to e8. And we draw a square around it. The rule says that if the king is inside of the square, the pawn will not be able to promote. And if it is outside the square, it will be able to promote. So let's say here, if black moves the pawn outside of the square, we draw the square again, and we see that black is out of the square. So we can promote safely. After b6, king e8, b7, king d8, and the king is one move to 8. So let's say black plays g5. So this does not allow white to play h4 because it will be captured. No matter what white does next, white will play, black will play h5, g4, h4, and g3. Unless, of course, the king comes to stop it, then that kind of stops our plan, our black's plan. But unless besides the point. Okay. So if black starts with h5, it is met with h4. And now black can still create a passed pawn with g5, but the h pawn will fall shortly after. H takes g5, h4, king f2, h3, king g3, h2, king takes h2, king f7. Yeah. So now we have three fast pawns. Okay. So next, I want to talk about attacking weak pawns. Chess is 99% tactics. You might have heard that one before, but this statement isn't entirely true. But tactics do flow from good positions, so you need to learn how to make good positions. So one of the main ways that we make good positions is by attacking weak pawns. So let's say black plays castle. You might see this move played at a 1000 to 1200 rating level. Can anyone tell me why this is a bad move?
Rook takes d7.
And well, rook takes d7 is one move, but then like knight e5 and then knight takes c4 is next. And also raise your hand. Don't just blurt out. Okay. So anyone else? Raise your virtual hand. Luca.
They can do, I'm guessing, C4, discovered pin, maybe.
Or you mean f4?
F4, yeah. I'm thinking white, my bad.
I mean, like, I'm talking about why is it bad for black? Elliot?
Since it's like the end game kind of, black shouldn't be castling instead should be playing something like King E7 or Rook B8.
Yeah, exactly. So we should be playing King E7 and keeping the king in the center and not castling. Because the king is also a strong attacker in the endgame. So, who can tell me what a good move is for black here? And lower your hand if you already want. Aparna? And before you tell me, the move is not King E7.
Oh. You could do ND4.
Knight D4. This is sort of a good move. It activates the knight to a good square, but it's not what I'm looking for.
What about rook? Wait, rook G8, like opening it to the file.
Rook G8.
I mean not G8, rook B8.
So after rook B8, what if white plays rook D2?
Oh, yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah, yes, yeah.
No, this is the correct move. You just have to find the follow-up.
Like rook B3.
Yeah, exactly. So after rook B3, white will try to bring their king in after they just realized
And then
how
does ND4 work?
knight d4, yeah, it does work, but also we could play king e7. So like if king's 2 now, then we just go rook b8. So they won't go king c2, but they'll play something like f4. And then now we play knight d4. So after king c1, what do we do? Or actually, I'll just play this move. Okay, so it's h5 and then h4. And now what do we do? Raise your hand. Anyone?
What about RHB8? Doubling.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking for. Rook HB8. So it puts more pressure on the B2 pawn. So white goes bishop F1. Can anyone tell me why they play bishop F1? And this is one of the better moves in this position. Elliot?
I was just saying that maybe Buck could play on the last move, knight f3.
Oh. Knight f3?
Yeah.
After knight f3, like bishop takes f3, rook takes f3, and then rook e1, and then go rook e3 next. Yeah, I think that's what they do. Okay, so bishop
Okay.
f1. Who can tell me why? Lower your hand if you already went. Asher.
Because it stops a skewer.
Can you tell me what skewer?
Like if the take.
Okay, like if white plays something like rook e1, then what does black do? No, Asher, you got it right. So like tell me what black does.
I don't know.
Why'd you say skewer then? Was there like some skewer like on this second rank? Okay, anyways, I'll just tell you what happens. So we play rook takes g3 and white will take, otherwise like
Oh, I know. I see. How after
the
the pawn takes then the knight will do knight to b3 and then attacking the king, and after he moves the king away we can take the rook.
Yeah, then when the king takes, we can take the pawn, and when the king moves, we take the bishop.
yeah, exactly. So after all of this, we're up 2 pawns and the game is basically over. So white found the right move, bishop f1, and then rook f3. So and then white plays king d1, and we play rook takes a3. So if b takes a3,
This makes
then we have rook b1, and then if like there's basically nothing that white can do here. So yeah. And for the next exercise, we're doing demolition of the pawn structure. Here we have an active queen, rook, bishop, and knight. So what can we do to take advantage of that? Raise your hand. And don't raise your hand if you already won. Yeah, this one's a bit hard. So, Siddhartha.
You could take never mind. Oops.
No, continue.
Okay. You could move your rook up. You could move rook e1 to e2.
Rook e2 is activating the rook, and you could also go rook d2 next, but we actually have a sneaky tactic here. So, oh, I kind of just,
Is it?
sorry. Okay. Yeah, so it's rook takes g7, and this move just completely destroys black because after bishop takes g7, we have queen g4, and there is basically nothing else black can do. If black tries rook g6, then knight h6, rook takes h6, and queen takes d7. So black is forced to go queen takes f5, and then after takes f5, we are completely winning because we also can bring the rook and the other rook into the game. Okay, so we're going to move on to the last section. Okay, let me share my screen. Okay, so the last section is about maximizing piece activity. Okay. So first, I want to talk about what is mobility and what is activity. So what we mean when we say mobility is, can the piece move? If it can, then the piece has mobility. If it can't, then it doesn't have mobility. Activity is subjective, meaning it depends. A piece can have mobility, but that doesn't mean it is very active. Activity is the number of squares that the piece can move to, and also if the piece is placed on a good square or not. Take the starting position, for example. White has 10 pieces that have no mobility, all 8 pawns and 2 knights. So after e4, the bishop has mobility and the queen has mobility. The king also has mobility, but we might not want to use that mobility. Also, the knight is getting more activity and can now move to e2. So e5, knight f3, knight c6. So after bishop b5, we are in the Roy Lopez. After move 1, both sides have already solved the problem of their kingside bishop not being able to move, or also not having mobility. So bishop b5, a6, bishop a4, knight f6. This is typical opening. Bishop e7, rook e1, b5, bishop e3, d6, d3. Planning to go d4 next, and castle h3, stopping bishop g4, bishop b7, and d4. Now all 4 bishops have some mobility, and so do all 4 knights. Okay, so that was mobility versus activity. And now we're going to move on to piece coordination. Okay, here we see a very good example of piece coordination. Already, our rooks are doubled along the semi-open c-file. Black's c-pawn is a backwards pawn because it has nowhere to go. Black's rooks are also very passive, and black's c-rook must stay there to defend the c-pawn, while black's f-rook has almost nowhere good to move. Doubled rooks are also known as a battery. Batteries also work with a queen and bishop or a rook and queen. So knowing all of that information, what should white play here? And don't raise your hand if you already went. Anyone? Mm. Yunhan, do you have any thoughts or ideas?
No.
No? Okay. Hmm. Axel, do you have any ideas?
Queen C3.
Yeah, Queen C3 is what I was looking for.
Yep.
So next, Black's C pawn will fall, and the D pawn will also fall shortly after. So Black has no way of defending this. So nice job, Axel. Okay. This is part 2 of piece activity and coordination. So here, one main part of this position is the knight on d5. Knights in the center are one of the best pieces, and that can be placed there because of all the squares they control in the opponent's space. We also have the knight placed on a light square, so the bishop will never be able to attack it. It makes the knight almost impossible to be kicked away from d5 and will stay there for the rest of the game. Okay. So those are just some notes. Okay. So one of the best next we're moving on to repositioning your pieces to gain space and activity. Elliot, do you have a question? Or
Is there really a difference between Queen C2 and Queen C3? From the what?
in this one?
No, the one before. Yeah, this one. Yeah, I don't. Is there really a difference or not really?
No. Yeah, it's just like both the same. But yeah, they're both the same. Okay.
Okay. I have one more question, but I'll save it for the end, I think.
Okay. So, one of the best ways to reposition your pieces on better squares is by asking yourself the question, if I could place this piece on any reasonable square, where would that be? And then try and find a way to make that happen. So knowing that, um, what um what should white play here? It's actually not really related to what I just said, so keep that in mind. Don't raise your hand if you already went. Anyone new?
Oh,
Um, um, Henry, do you have any ideas? Okay, I guess not. Anish, do you have any ideas?
Well, nothing comes to mind right now.
What was that?
Nick, can you hear me?
Yeah,
Yes, so nothing comes to my mind right now.
okay. Um, okay, Sharav.
Bishop takes knight on f5. I mean, yeah. And then if the G pawn recaptures, you can do queen to G6 check, G3 check, and the king is forced to go to H5, or bishop blocks on G7. If king goes to H8, then you can bring your other pieces into the in and it'll be a bad position for black.
Yeah, so but what if e takes f5?
I guess there's nothing.
What about knight f3, knight
No,
g5?
yeah, knight f3 is correct because we're playing knight d4 next, and then this one becomes isolated, so it's an easy
Not knight
target.
g5? I guess it is h5
Knight
though.
g5, then
Or
yeah,
that, yeah.
h6
Or
or
that.
h5. So if black tries to stop it, then we have knight g5, and then after h5, then e6, yeah, e6, and then f takes e6, and then I think we have queen g3, and then we can move this knight back, and then also we can reposition it on e5. So yeah, that's what happens if black tries to stop it. So yeah, bishop takes f5 is the correct move. Okay, so that is all I have about the 5 steps. So now I want to answer some common questions that you all had. Okay, so what are some quick openings for beginners? It's, there's not really any quick openings, like quick sidelines, yeah, but quick openings, um, I think you should learn e4 first or d4. Those are the 2 main openings that you should try to learn for beginners. Okay, second, when you attack the castled king, how do you know it is safe? If you attack the castled king, if you know it's safe, it depends on the position, but you should look if there's any way that your opponent can attack the center, but if it's completely closed, then if the center is kind of weak and open, you should not do it. But if it's closed, but your opponent has pieces on defending, then you should not do it. But if the center is closed and locked, then and there are no pieces and the pieces are kind of far away, or it's hard for the pieces to defend, then you should go for it. Uh, assuming that you have enough pieces for the attack to happen. Okay. Third, what is your practice schedule? And is include in your practice session. So my practice schedule is if I have a lot of other things to do, then 1 or 2 hours on weekdays, and then on weekends, usually 4 to 5 hours. And okay. And if I don't have a lot to do on weekdays, then 3 hours. 4, how can I improve my middle game? And what strategy should I follow in a tournament? Do you have any specific recommendations? Okay, so to improve your middle game, I just gave you a whole bunch of tips. So you should attack weaknesses, And hold on, I'll go back. Okay, so you have to like create a list of candidate moves, and for each candidate move, think of the opponent's forcing moves and build up a variation until pieces stop attacking each other. And at the end of the forcing variation, evaluate your final position and make your first move. So, yeah, that is what you should do for the middle game. And fifth, what is your favorite opening? My favorite opening is probably the London system because I like playing positions that are like that. And then sixth, at this level, around 1,000, which is better, learning more openings or going deeper into a few select openings. So usually it is always better to learn more, to learn go, or go deeper into a few select openings because if you just learn like every single opening but only like a few moves in each one, then you're not gonna know all the correct structures and attacking patterns or yeah, everything else. So you should always go deeper into a few select openings. Seventh, what techniques can I use to improve my recall speed during quizzes? I don't really know what that means. Like quizzes? Like for quizzes, um, create like a song or something. I don't think that was the correct question, but okay. Eighth, how to improve my end game. So, I also gave you a few tips for this one. So, only two correct plans in your end games are going to work, and no other plan will work. Either you attack your opponent's weak pawns or use your passed pawns, and if you can do both, that's great. Otherwise, aim to do at least one of them. And if you can't do any of them, make a move that will help you do at least one of them on your future turns. Okay. Ninth, how do you build a rule or mental block for when to not do a bad move if it does not work? Um, um, hold on, let me think about it.
Say just, watch this video again, and we'll also send you the presentation deck so you have all the tips, right? So it's not one or two tips. You have to think through the entire game and all the stages of the game. So that's what I would say, Neve. So actually, the kids are anxious, Neve. So maybe we'll do three questions. They can ask their own questions. I think first was Elliot. Elliot, do you want to ask your question?
A couple, just two. What if black plays rook takes c2 in the last position?
You want to bring it
Let me
up
check my
again,
screen.
Neve?
Okay. Or this position,
Yeah. Well, yeah. After knight
like
f3.
after knight f3. So rook takes c2. I think that we can go bishop d4, and then like if queen takes b3, then with um queen h4, then rook moves, and then actually not queen h4. I think that we can do e6 first,
It's a
and
complicated
then if
position. Yeah.
f6, then
We'd take it.
yeah, rook b1, and then it's pinned. So like not black won't do queen take 3. They'll do like queen b4, and then I think we can do knight g4, h6, and then let me think. Maybe e6 because you can't take because of queen h8.
It's a
And
pretty
then
complicated position. Finding knight
yeah.
f3 is pretty hard, I think. I don't think I'd play
In
that.
the interest of time, let's move on.
Okay.
Let's do
Okay.
the last question from Mokshit.
How do you like know who's better or who's like less better? Who's better?
So you have to do like an analysis. So you have to first look at where or like how much material you have. If it's equal, then that's fine. And then second, you have to like if it's a middle game, then you have to see if the position's closed and someone has more knights, then they're usually better. And then if it's an open position and someone has more bishops, then it's usually better for them. And then if it's an end game, you have to evaluate or like goes for all of all of the game. Like you have to see where the piece positioning, that's very important. Like that's probably the most important out of all of these. Like how good the pieces are and how much activity, how active they are. So yeah.
All
Okay.
right. So, Neev, do you know how to set up a Lichess Arena?
Yeah.
Or Ishan is also there.
Arena
You want?
or Simul?
Okay, we have Ishan and Neev here. So, you want to play Simul with Ishan and Neev? Type Simul in the meeting, in the note, or if you want to do Arena with each other, type Arena. So far, Arena is winning. 1 Simul, 3-1 so far. Oh, nice. Somebody made a poll. Okay, we'll wait for 30 seconds. Yeah, it's mostly Arena, Ishan or Neev. Ishan, Neev, do you want them to set up? You know how to do
Okay,
it?
I'll
Arena
set
or
it. Yeah.
all right. Just do for 25 minutes. What's the best time control, Ishan or Neev?
Like 7 plus 2.
7 minutes? Oh, 10 plus 5
Yeah.
will take too long, Tristan. So let's do 7.
Actually, 6 plus 2.
Okay, let's do 6 plus 2. That way kids can play 2 games at least. All right, if you need time, if you don't know Neev, Ishan can do it maybe.
Okay. Okay, I sent the link in the chat. So press on that.
Yeah.
It starts in like 1.5 minutes, so join as fast as possible.
Yep. And how much time did you give? 25 minutes?
No, it wasn't letting me do enough time with 25.
So how much did you do?
And they can just pause if they want.
Okay, if they want to leave, they can leave or pause or whatnot, right? Okay, but we'll stop in about 25 minutes. Please be nice to each other in the chat. I'll stop recording.